Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar with American West Metals. I'm Danica Warburton, the Investor Relations Representative for American West, and I'm delighted to be joined today by your Managing Director, Dave O'Neill, who's going to run you through the recently announced Storm Mineral Resource Estimate, the Maiden one for American West, and then we're going to get to some Q&A questions. We've had lots sent through, so very keen to get to those.
Thank you, and thank you for joining everybody, wherever you are in the world today.
Thank you, Dave, and congratulations to you and the team. I was actually looking back through the presentation. I know you didn't get to the appendix, but that discovery slide is pretty impressive. So yeah, well done. And we do have a lot of investor questions, so we'll jump to those, but perhaps we'll just stop sharing the screen for now so we can see you up close and personal. So to kick off with, I've actually tried to consolidate all the questions that came through via the registration page. So thank you to those who did submit a question. You did mention that the Maiden resource was built on the back of a single season and relatively small, which obviously augurs well, as you said, for future resource growth. Can you give us the indicative timelines of the updated resource, or we've been a bit premature asking that?
No, I think not at all. I think, again, what we've managed to achieve last year and the groundwork we've put in, and the fact that these deposits are open, the drilling will be focused in those zones, obviously, in the first instance. And so we'd imagine we can get a resource update at the back end of this drilling season, if not sooner. You know, certainly if one of the deposits was to progress quicker than the others, etc., we could wrap that up and then put something out. But look, I think that the most prudent thing to do will wait to the back end of the resource season, and certainly at the back end of this year get an update out.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the drilling season was kicking off in late March. What is the field season for 2024? When does it run till? And I guess importantly, a few questions on this. Do you have enough cash to execute?
Yes. Well, I'll answer the first question first. Look, we intend to get the camp up and running in the back end of March, and then the geophysics will flow on from that. So we'd like to get a little bit of a head start with the geophysics. So like I said, it's such a good targeting tool that'll give us a nice pipeline of targets for the exploration space. And then shortly after that, we'll get the drill rigs up and running. So we're planning to have, at this point, 2 RC rigs, one doing resource definition, one doing near mine exploration. And then obviously the diamond rigs up there as well. So 1 to 2 diamond rigs, and they'll be doing the more regional stuff, the deeper drilling as well, progress the exploration side of things. So lots to do. And obviously that takes money, and given we've still got 4 million in the bank, we think we're well placed, given the next couple of months are going to be really light on in terms of costs. We're well placed to start this season off and head into quite far into the season. And look, investors shouldn't forget that we've got over $5 million coming back to us, hopefully this year, in some very well-priced options that are due to expire this year. So, we think that'll give us a significant cash boost during the season. And yeah, that'll set us up well.
Okay, brilliant. And when we look at the sort of peer comparisons, noting that this is your maiden resource, and it doesn't include all the recent drilling, etc., what you touched on. How does it compare to other open pit copper projects globally?
Yeah, probably one thing I didn't put in the presentation is just the deposit style, and we talked to it, but Storm is a sediment-hosted copper, so its clearest and analogues are Botswana, the Congo. So again, Mateo, we use that as an example. Look, Storm sits right in the middle in terms of grade. I mean, the average grade for sediment-hosted copper deposits on average is about 1.1% to 1.5%. Obviously, you've got the bigger ones and the more famous ones like Kamoa around the 2%, but they are certainly at one end of the bell curve. And it's also in tonnes. So the average deposit size is 10 to 15 million tonnes per deposit. Cyclone already is right in the average there, which is really exciting to see. And like I've talked to, that's certainly going to grow to be above that. So Storm is shaping up in that regard to be better than average, which is fantastic to see. But investors should remember there's 3 or 4 different types of copper deposits. The porphyry, generally big low grade things. big capital development. There's the higher grade end of the spectrum, which is the VMS and other sort of and polymetallic style deposits, which tend to be open pit, but mostly underground. And then you have the sediment hosted ones that sort of sit in the middle, and some other weird ones around as well. IOCG is the other big one, like Olympic Dam and Hillside and things like that. So Storm in its deposit style is, well, let's talk about open pits as well. And so, look, I think Storm is going to rank in the top 5% of sort of open pit opportunities globally. One thing I maybe didn't labour on is that 100% of our resources are open pittable. So if you look at our ASX peers, again, their grades are just a little bit north of ours, but most of those operations are underground, and that's a key consideration when you're talking mining costs, etc.
Yeah, so it seems like the resource was a good result. Why do you think the share price sold off yesterday on the back of the news?
Well, good question. And note to self, don't sell into a bad market. You only provide volume. But look, I think that question is probably bigger than American West Metals. It seems to be a trend. Anyone's put a resource out recently has really got sold into, and maybe that's a volume thing. And I had some advice yesterday. Someone said, look, I don't feel too bad. I mean, to be honest, all of the sentiment that's come to us regarding the resource has been overly positive, and people are shaking their heads at share price performance. But I think we shouldn't forget that there's a lot of funds at the moment in the red across the board with other commodities, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't stop people taking a profit off the table in this point. So look, it's sort of, in the short term is not ideal, but certainly, what we've shown at Storm, the catalyst coming up and the program we have, I think it's going to certainly turn around.
Yeah. Yeah, well, market always loves discovery. So maybe we'll jump to the drilling program, the upcoming one for this year. You did go into a little bit of detail, but what are the key focus areas, both at Storm and then regionally? Because I understand you've only tested about 5% of the copper belt that hosts Storm. So what are you most excited about, I guess?
Well, obviously money and not wasting a dollar is the key to operating in Storm. And I think, we did really well at that last year. And I think taking that same cautious approach going forwards. So what that entitles is there's clear walk-up drill targets in terms of the resource expansion. I've put 5 or 10 of those on that map. But look, we'll prioritise those and go to, clearly we want to see the resource expand. So, and I could put 4 drill rigs on doing that tomorrow if we needed to, but also I think bring in things like Thunder into the resource equation. That's going to be a significant boost in grade. We've put some preliminary modelling around that might look like now, and I think that's going to certainly get some drill meters. And same with Lightning Ridge, they're all in the same area. And then there's the new targets, because again, adding an intersection like Thunder or Lightning Ridge to the 2024 program will show that there's future resource growth beyond 2024. But then also, how long's a piece of string? And then we've obviously got the exploration potential as well. So again, we want to do that methodically. We want to do what works. We know the geophysics works first, use that to identify targets, and then again, not waste a dollar, go down there and test these very clear targets: tornado, blizzard, and tempest. Okay,
well, that ties in quite nicely with a few questions. One from George on, I guess, at what point do you start mining? He's asked, is it your intention to keep building out the resource, and if so, until when? Or does it make sense to fast track the mobile DSO operation and get revenue in the door earlier? What are the pros and cons of both scenarios?
To be honest, if we did not find another ounce of copper, we have a project with this DSO going forwards. And that to me is the comforting factor about Storm. Given we believe it, it's going to have significantly high margin economics based on the preferred processing method, then we think that there's a project here. And so that's really nice to know. And obviously we know it's going to grow with the exploration potential. So look, we're progressing those studies because I think that's an important part of the story, and we don't want to do it in the background. So we need to be careful that how we balance it. We want to do both at the same time, and I think we're well funded and we have enough information to be able to do that. We hope to get some of the DSO and metallurgical results out shortly as an update, and certainly that'll shine some light on what this thing could be. And so that's an important piece for us. That flows directly to permitting. So permitting is obviously the timeline which you know, is the constraint on getting obviously to a mining point. And so all of the activities we need to do to front end load that we're doing behind the scenes here. So look, that's usually a 2 to 3 year period. But you know, certainly with the community liaison we've begun, the environmental studies that we've done last year and we're doing this year, we're on the front foot with that.
And on the processing, Victor has asked what the recovery percentage for copper is. You touched on it, but
yeah, it depends. Yeah, look, it depends on what processing method the chosen one we use. With your sorting, it was quite high. We've shown with hydrometallurgical, it's plus 90%. The jigging and DMS type stuff we're working on now. So it's a sliding scale, and it depends where, you know, throughput versus yield versus copper grade. And so while we're still tuning the dials there, I wouldn't put a recovery number on it, but we use 90% in our economic assumptions for the mineral resource estimation.
Okay. And then another one from Jeremy on, I guess, the DSO operation. Have any discussions or early stage discussions started with offtake customers or potential offtake customers? Absolutely.
I refer to that in the presentation. I think it's prudent to understand what the end product should be. For us to just go and blindly develop a DSO product and then market it is probably not in the best interest of the smelter and us. And so we're talking because one, we want to understand what the specs are. And like I said, I mean, a lot of smelters will say, well, why give us 50% copper when you can give us 25, 30? And that's music to our ears because it means we can dumb down the processing to achieve that, which means cheaper costs, obviously. And sure, it's more shipping costs because you're moving more product, but you know, shipping is the best way to move things as opposed to rail and trucks, etc. So it's only marginally different. So yes, the short answer is yes. And it's good to know the industry, it's good to know the product, and it's good to know who wants what and when.
Absolutely. David has asked a question on the chat. Is there, well, you've mentioned there is Storm shallow copper resources, but what about the deeper copper zones identified last year? I guess we should touch on that.
Yeah. So that forms part of the holistic exploration plan and strategy. And all the copper at Storm's related, and that's what has become clear last year. And so certainly the near surface, we've shown that the tonnage potential exists there. So why would you go straight to something at depth to exploit? But it's definitely a key part of the equation. What we think the material at depth is, it actually mimics the cyclone zone. So if you can imagine the cyclone's flat lying, it is average of 1 to 3% copper. That's exactly what we're seeing in the intervals that we've drilled at depth. Sure, we've only seeing smaller intervals at this point, but that's about narrowing into where that other cyclone might be sitting there, or multiples of the cyclone. And I'll refer people to Ivanhoe's put out some really interesting news lately about their copper deposits they're finding. And despite having Kamoa-Kakula, they've put out an exploration update on a deposit they've just defined, which is 5 million tonnes at it's about 2 to 3% copper. But what's interesting is that's at 600 to 1,000 meters of vertical depth, flat lying, is only a few meters thick at those grades. And so that's all you need to be economic. And that's, if someone like Ivanhoe's putting that information out in the market, that's certainly music to our ears. And that's kind of what you can expect from these deposits. So, you know, don't expect the 30 to 40 meters thick intersections down there. We're hoping there is, trust me. You know, and that's certainly the goal, but it's more typically what we see at surface, we'll see at depth as well.
Okay, and a follow-up question from David. Are we talking $1 billion resource for Storm? And how many billions is it worth?
Well, I won't answer that, but people can, you know, what we have today times the copper price minus processing, mining, overheads, company, et cetera, and people can work out their own NPVs, et cetera. But a lot of assumptions to put in there, but certainly on a metal value that's in the billions to date, and it's only going to get bigger.
Well, hopefully now the resource is out, we should be getting some research out in the sphere, which should answer some of those questions on valuation. I'm conscious that we've gone a little bit over time, so everyone always wants to know about timelines and, you know, putting a pin in some catalysts or milestones that are coming up. Could you neatly summarize maybe a bit of a hit list of what's in store for investors?
Yeah. Look, we'd love to communicate to the market and you guys, obviously, what the plan is for this year in a bit more detail. And so that's going to be the next piece of news. Once that solidifies a little bit more, obviously a lot of moving parts on that. So hopefully that out. Obviously, update on the metallurgical work would be nice. And then heading into PDAC, and it's not long before we're opening the camp up, kicking the polar bears out, and getting underway. And so it's going to be a long season. And so, you know, a lot to report on, a lot to look forward to. Yeah, who knows what the catalysts are? Hopefully, early resource definition and discovery very early on, if we've done our homework.
And what do these polar bears eat? It doesn't look like there's much food there in the background. So
no, there's not, and that's why we actually don't get a lot. And that was you know, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment. They're usually on the coast and nowhere near us. But we did have a tent be attacked last year in the winter, because they do move through the area from time to time. But certainly not a risk, not when it looks like this behind me.
Yeah, well, it can't be any worse than Australia.
Well, there's no animals. There's nothing to eat. So,
yeah, really, can it?
No.
So, okay. So, I guess to wrap up with, are there any final parting words that you wanted to leave investors with today? No,
look, thanks for joining. Good to talk to you guys to kick the year off. It's going to be a big year, and keep your ear to the ground and eyes open for news. And happy to take questions. And you know, if people have got emails, etc. So if there's something pressing on people's mind, reach out and hopefully we can answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the beginning, and much more to come, which is going to be really exciting over the coming months. And as Dave said, if we didn't get to your question or we didn't quite answer it, structure it in the way that you wanted to hear, please feel free to email Dave and myself. Our details are on the bottom of the ASX announcements, and we'll get back to you individually. And we'll also post the replay to this webinar, so you can listen back through it, and maybe if a question accrues from that, just shout out. So thank you very much to everyone who joined, and thank you, Dave, for a very informative presentation.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.